High in the Swiss Alps, a little girl discovers a fleeting world of beauty and freedom. But happiness doesn't last forever. When she's taken away and faces the hardships of the city, her spirit never fades. This is a story of hope, courage, and a journey that shows us home isn't just a place. It's where the heart feels alive. Hello everyone, welcome to ScreenVille. Today we're exploring the beautiful and touching tale of Heidi. At the beginning of the story, we see a little girl named Heidi running and playing in an open field, all by herself. Heidi had come here with her aunt. When the local people saw her aunt bringing Heidi, they told her, "It is absolutely not right to give the child to that old man." Heidi's aunt was actually planning to leave Heidi with her grandfather. This little girl's parents had died 5 years ago. Her aunt had raised her with great difficulty, but now she no longer wanted to be responsible for Heidi. So her aunt was bringing this sweet, restless child to her grandfather. Heidi's grandfather was also a loner. He lived all by himself on a secluded mountain. When Heidi's aunt tried to leave the child with her grandfather, the old man yelled at her, "Take this trouble and get away from here." In truth, he didn't want to take responsibility for Heidi either. Heidi's aunt tried to explain to the old man that she had gotten a job in the city, so it was no longer possible for her to keep Heidi with her. But the old man wouldn't listen to a word she said. He chased them away from the house. Heidi's aunt cunningly left the little girl there and ran away. The little girl had nowhere else to go. Her grandfather wouldn't let her into the house either. So, that night, in the midst of a terrible storm, the little child spent the night all alone in the goat shed. The next morning, the grandfather opened the shed door to milk the goats. Afterwards, the old man kindly let Heidi have some milk to drink. After she finished the milk, the old man took the child to a local orphanage. The father at the orphanage, upon seeing the child, said to the old man, "Caring for your granddaughter is your sacred duty. You cannot leave her here like this." So the father told Heidi to go back with her grandfather. It seemed like such a big world, yet there was no place for this orphaned little girl. So the child followed her grandfather again and said, "Grandfather, will I stay in the goat shed again today?" The old man angrily said, "Stay wherever you want." Hearing this, the child was overjoyed and went inside the old man's house. She saw that there was no proper place for her to stay in this house. However, up in the attic, amidst the hay, Heidi made a place for herself to sleep. That night, Heidi told her grandfather, "I want to stay with you. Grandfather, I don't want to go to the orphanage." The next morning, Heidi starting her day at her grandfather's house with immense joy. And today, grandfather sent Heidi up the mountain with a boy named Peter, who looked after his goats so she could learn how to tend to them. Taking Heidi with him, Peter went up into the local mountains with his goats. Upon reaching the picture-perfect mountains, Heidi seemed to find her freedom. She was extremely happy. However, Peter ate half of the food that her grandfather had packed for her. Heidi asked, "Did you eat my food?" Peter replied, "The goats ate it." This led to a small argument, and at one point, Peter started hitting the goat feed with a stick. Seeing this, Heidi tried to stop Peter and said, "If you never hit the goats again, I will give you half of my food every day." Hearing this, Peter agreed. And through this incident, a very strong friendship formed between the two of them. They played together a lot that day. At one point, Peter said to Heidi, "Did you know your grandfather took someone's life many years ago? Do you know anything about that?" Heidi knew nothing about this. So that night when she returned home, the little girl didn't have the courage to sleep near her grandfather. She started to go to the goat shed to sleep. Seeing this, the old man understood that Peter had told her about this. So, grandfather said to Heidi, "Will you believe the lies people tell? Or will you believe what you have seen with your own eyes?" Heidi had seen her grandfather's love. So, she hugged grandfather with great joy and quickly went up to the attic to sleep. The next morning, grandfather started making something with pieces of wood from different trees. Meanwhile, Heidi went to play with her friend Peter. Heidi told Peter, "I won't see you anymore. I'm going to the orphanage." Disappointed, Peter told Heidi, "My life will be spent with these goats." In the evening, when Heidi returned home, she saw that her grandfather had made a new chair just for her. When Heidi found out that she would be staying with her grandfather from now on, her joy knew no bounds. She began to spend even more open-hearted time with her friend Peter. Several months passed like this. As winter approached, Peter would no longer come to herd the goats. He had to go to school. He would return during the spring holidays to help with the goats again. Hearing this, Heidi asked her grandfather, "Grandfather, can I go to school too?" But he remained silent. The next day, grandfather set off for the village with Heidi to sell a goat. While selling the goat there, the local people and the father from the orphanage urged Heidi's grandfather to send Heidi to school. But without listening to any of them, the old man returned home with Heidi. By then, winter had set in. Everything was completely covered in white snow. The little girl, being alone, suffered from profound loneliness. She waited with eager anticipation for spring. Meanwhile, to cheer Heidi up, her grandfather carved a wooden eagle for her. But because Heidi was feeling very sad for Peter, grandfather made a wooden sled and took Heidi on it to Peter's house. By then, Heidi had become very dear to her grandfather. She had become the only joy in his solitary life. Grandfather left Heidi at Peter's house and went off to work. At Peter's house, Heidi saw that Peter lived with his mother and grandmother. Peter's grandmother was blind. She was also so old that she could not chew her food properly because she had lost her teeth. After learning all this, when grandfather came to pick up Heidi in the evening, Heidi told him, "We are so fortunate, grandfather. We can at least chew our own food." Hearing this, her grandfather happily carried her back home. And so, the winter passed and spring arrived once again. One spring morning, Heidi's aunt came from the city to see Heidi. The aunt told grandfather that she had found a very wealthy family in the city who wanted to adopt Heidi. There, Heidi would get good food, nice clothes, and a good education. But her grandfather refused to listen. Instead, he told her, "Stop showing this false concern and get away from here. Heidi will stay with me." Although the aunt left after hearing this, she waited around to meet Heidi. In the evening, on her way home, the aunt called Heidi aside and said, "I have found a very good place for you. You will have a friend there. You will get wonderful food and clothes. Come with me right now or we'll miss the train." But Heidi didn't want to go anywhere without telling her grandfather. Seeing this, the aunt told her that grandfather had apparently asked her to go with the aunt. Hearing this, the little girl, feeling heartbroken, set off with her aunt. Meanwhile, as soon as grandfather heard the news from Peter, he ran to find her. But by then, Heidi's aunt had already boarded the train with the little girl. For the last time, Heidi said goodbye to the village, watching her beloved grandfather's house and these mountains until they faded from view. Heidi's aunt brought the little girl to the big city. She took Heidi to a massive house that looked like a palace. There, the aunt introduced Heidi to a lady named Miss Mia and a little girl named Clara. Clara was paralyzed, with both her legs unable to move. Miss Mia was essentially Clara's manager because Clara's parents were not in the house. So Miss Mia was responsible for all of Clara's care. She had brought Heidi here to be a friend for Clara. Heidi's aunt took a large sum of money in exchange for Heidi and left. Meanwhile, the spirited Heidi instantly formed a very good relationship with Clara. While playing on the very first day, they broke a flower vase. After this incident, Heidi, Clara, and her manager all sat down to eat together. Everyone here began to love Heidi like a daughter of the house. However, Heidi struggled to follow the strict rules and cleanliness of city life. Seeing this, Miss Mia became angry, but warned Heidi that she must wake up early, eat breakfast, complete her studies by noon, rest, play indoors in the afternoon, finish dinner by 7, and then go to bed. Miss Mia ran Clara's life in a highly disciplined manner, but Heidi felt like a caged bird in the confined house. She tried to open the windows, but could see no trace of the mountains she loved. The house staff bathed Heidi, cleaned her up, and dressed her in new clothes. Every day, Heidi would secretly hide a piece of bread and keep it with her. Clara's house tutor came to teach Clara and Heidi, but Heidi couldn't study at all. This annoyed the tutor greatly, and he went to the manager and said that keeping such an uneducated girl with Clara might cause Clara to fall behind in her studies. Meanwhile, Heidi's friendship with Clara gradually grew deeper. That day, Clara took Heidi to a secret room where there was a huge painting of her mother. It turned out that Clara was healthy when her mother died. But after her mother's death, due to a sudden illness, Clara became paralyzed. Clara had no friends at all, so she loved Heidi very much. Heidi, on the other hand, couldn't stand being in the closed room anymore. So she called one of the house employees and asked him to open the window. Heidi asked him, "Why can't we see the mountains from here?" The man said, "The mountains are actually very far away. Maybe you can see them from the top of that tower." Hearing this, during nap time, instead of sleeping, Heidi took Clara and started heading toward that tower. She wanted to see her home, the mountains, just once. The brave little girl managed to get Clara through the crowded market and somehow reached the tower. Heidi left Clara downstairs and went up the tower alone. Meanwhile, a woman had brought some kittens to sell right in front of Clara. Back at the house, everyone had realized the two children were missing. They were frantically searching for them. Up on the tower, Heidi looked around with wide, amazed eyes, searching for those familiar mountains. But in this city of brick and stone, the little girl could not see any mountains anywhere. Terribly disappointed, Heidi came down to find that Clara had bought a few kittens. On their way back home, an employee from the house spotted the children and immediately brought them home. Seeing this, manager Mia was furious with the children. The fact that they had brought kittens into the house made matters worse, as Miss Mia had a terrible allergic reaction and started sneezing and coughing uncontrollably. She was extremely annoyed by everything. So, during the evening meal, while Mia served everyone else, she punished Heidi by not giving her any food and made her stand facing the wall. Clara was deeply hurt too, but she couldn't say anything to her manager. Meanwhile, Heidi stood there, turning to stone from intense hunger and humiliation. Unable to bear today's humiliation, Heidi started packing her things to leave the house. Miss Mia forcefully stopped her, insisting she stay. As they struggled, several pieces of soft bread fell from Heidi's bag. When Miss Mia asked about them, Heidi said they were for Peter's grandmother, who could no longer chew hard food. During this conversation, Clara saw Heidi trying to leave and was heartbroken. She thought that perhaps no one really wanted to stay with her. So, the poor girl, feeling hurt, went to her room. Seeing Clara's condition, the helpless Heidi returned to her room. She began to cry uncontrollably for her grandfather. The next morning, Heidi learned that Clara had fallen ill, so she went to her friend's room to see her. The poor Clara, looking utterly helpless, said to Heidi, "I have no one but you. I am so alone. Heidi, please stay with me. We will be so happy together." Though poor Heidi's heart remained in the village, she couldn't bring herself to leave Clara in such a helpless state. Afterwards, they sat down to study again. And as usual, Heidi couldn't focus on her studies at all that day either. Just then, a horse-drawn carriage arrived outside. Inside were Clara's father, John, and Clara's grandmother. John was often away on business, so he couldn't spend much time with his daughter. Returning home today, John went to see his daughter first. John liked Heidi very much. Not only that, but Clara's grandmother also immediately took Heidi to her heart. Later, when John and the grandmother were sitting, manager Mia came in. She told them that she could no longer look after Heidi because Heidi was an uneducated village girl who didn't even want to study properly. But John was willing to do anything to keep his daughter happy. So, he decided that Heidi would stay in the house. That night, the grandmother sat with Heidi and began to read her a story. But after reading for a while, she gave the storybook to Heidi and told her to finish it herself. The grandmother explained to the little girl that if she learned to read, she could read such storybooks on her own. The grandmother could see that Heidi wasn't happy there at all. So, she called John and told him that the child should be sent back to her village. She wasn't well here at all. But John arranged for better food and clothes for Heidi. Still, he didn't want to leave his daughter alone. That night, the palace staff again heard strange noises. They thought there might be a ghost in the house because the door to a locked room had swung wide open by itself. They informed John about this ghost. Meanwhile, starting the next morning, Heidi began studying on her own so she could read the storybook. With the house tutor's help, Heidi quickly became very proficient in her studies. She read the rest of that unfinished story to everyone. Everyone was overjoyed to hear Heidi read so beautifully. John promised his daughter that Heidi would stay with them forever. Hearing this, Heidi felt even more trapped. One evening, the grandmother left the house. Overwhelmed by intense loneliness and a feeling of imprisonment, Heidi had a bad dream about her grandfather in the middle of the night. Meanwhile, John and the doctor had stayed awake until midnight to catch the ghost. That's when they heard the sound of a door opening. Moving forward slowly, they saw that it wasn't a ghost, but the little girl, Heidi, who had opened it. Heidi was sleepwalking all around the room. It was as if she was desperately trying to escape this captivity. When Heidi turned around and went back to lie in her bed, the doctor noticed she had a high fever, so he began to care for her. Just then, Heidi woke up. The doctor asked her what was wrong. Was she missing home very much? Heidi replied, "Yes, I really want to go back to my grandfather." Hearing such words from the helpless child, the doctor told John directly that it was absolutely wrong to keep the child here like this. She might become even more ill and needed to be sent home quickly. John spent the whole night thinking about whether to send the child back or not. The next morning, while having breakfast with his daughter, he told her everything. They would take Heidi back home. Keeping a little girl trapped like this would make her sick. But Clara, in immense pain, screamed, "Papa, I am sick. I have no one without Heidi. I want Heidi." Saying this, she angrily went to her room. However, John could not keep another child imprisoned for the sake of his own. So, he told Heidi to get ready. Heidi went to see Clara one last time, but Clara, feeling hurt, wouldn't speak to her. So, without a final goodbye, Heidi gave her toy bird to Clara's father and said, "Please give this to Clara. Bring her to visit us in our village home." Saying this, Heidi set off for her village. A staff member from the house, along with a box of soft bread, took Heidi back to her grandfather. The staff member put Heidi on a cart headed to her village and said goodbyes. The moment the cart arrived in her village, the local people were utterly astonished to see her. They even took some of the expensive items she had brought with her. There, Heidi reunited with her friend Peter. The little girl, holding the box of bread, ran with Peter towards his village. First, Heidi visited Peter's blind grandmother and handed over the soft bread she had brought for her. Without wasting a moment, Heidi then ran to her grandfather. Her grandfather ran to her when he saw her. Grandfather and granddaughter held each other in a long, tight embrace, full of immense affection. Heidi got her old life back and began spending her days beautifully again, having tremendous fun with her friend Peter. Laughing and playing, Heidi spent several months this way. By then, winter had come again. Heidi had started living in the village with her grandfather only during the winters. She had started going to school with her friends. While everyone else in her school wanted to become farmers or shepherds, Heidi was the only girl who wanted to become a writer. She would write about all the events of her life in letters and send them to Clara. Hearing the stories of Heidi's life, Clara forgot all her resentment and wanted to visit that village to see her friend. Immediately, Clara's grandmother brought her to the village to meet Heidi. Heidi, overjoyed to see her friend, ran and hugged her tightly. The little girl was also thrilled to see the grandmother. Here the grandmother sat with grandfather and, while chatting, mentioned that she would like to leave her granddaughter here for a few days. Hearing this, grandfather was very happy and promised the grandmother that he would take great care of Clara as their honored guest. After the grandmother left the village, Heidi and Clara spent wonderful time together. They ate, explored, and shared many stories. But seeing all this, Peter grew intensely jealous. Because of Clara, he had lost his friend. Here, instead of going with Peter, Heidi was busy playing with Clara, something Peter couldn't bear at all. That night, the two children spent a long time stargazing under the open sky. The next day, while they were laughing and playing inside, Peter was burning with envy outside. In a fit of rage, he took Clara's wheelchair, which was outside, and pushed it down the mountainside, breaking it. Grandfather, unable to find the wheelchair anywhere around the house, started carrying Clara on his shoulders to show her the mountains. But grandfather knew perfectly well that Peter had done this. Grandfather set Clara down on top of the mountain and walked away. While Heidi and Clara were playing, a butterfly landed on Clara's foot. To everyone's astonishment, Clara slowly began to stand on her feet to catch the butterfly. Seeing this, both Heidi and Peter helped her walk. Everyone was amazed by this incredible sight. The next day, Clara's grandmother and her father John arrived with several people to take his daughter back. John was furious. He couldn't believe his mother had left his daughter in such a place. He urgently wanted to see his daughter. And just then, Clara appeared before him, walking on her own feet. Seeing this miraculous sight, John's joy knew no bounds. He hugged his daughter and wept uncontrollably. Overwhelmed with happiness, John accepted Heidi as his own daughter. Heidi now had two families, one with grandfather and another with Clara. Meanwhile, the grandmother called Heidi over and gifted her a diary and a pen, because since childhood, Heidi had wanted to be a writer. Afterwards, Heidi bid farewell to her dear friend and sent her back to the city, while she herself stayed in the village with her grandfather. Sitting in her own village, Heidi began writing her stories in the diary given by the grandmother. She stretched out her arms and enjoyed this free life. And with this event, today's extraordinary story comes to an end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to ScreenVille. Join us for more inspiring stories that remind us why kindness and courage matter most.